Hey guys, tonight we begin with something quiet, but powerful. Something that shaped nearly every moment of modern life, even the one you're living right now. You might not feel it, but every sip of coffee, every drive to work, every bill that passes through your hands carries the faint echo of an agreement made long ago far away under the soft heat of the desert sun. Before we begin, take a moment to settle in. Find a comfortable position, maybe adjust your pillow a little, and if you like, let the lights fade to a warm glow. If you enjoy stories like this, calm, slow, and full of the hidden details that shaped our digital world, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it feels right to you. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always soothing to see people from every corner of the world listening to the same quiet story, some drifting off to sleep, others just beginning their evening. Now take a deep breath, let your shoulders relax, and listen to the soft hum around you. Maybe the fan turning slowly or the sound of night outside your window. Let it all blend together, a simple, quiet background for tonight's journey. Because tonight, we're traveling not into a dream, but into the calm, unseen machinery that powers the modern world. A story that begins not with a battle or a revolution, but with a handshake. A quiet, deliberate understanding, one that would make a single nation's currency the heartbeat of global trade. This is the story of the Petrodollar system, a secret deal made in silence that forever changed how money, oil, and power flow through the veins of civilization. But we'll explore it gently, one layer at a time. No sudden turns, no sharp edges, just soft steps through the corridors of time. So as you breathe in slowly and exhale even slower, imagine the world dimming around you, the sound of paper rustling in an office in Washington, the hum of air conditioners in a desert palace, the slow rhythm of oil tankers drifting across a sleeping sea. And as those sounds fade, the story begins quietly, where all great changes start in the spaces no one was watching. Chapter 1, The World Before the Deal. If we're going to understand how a quiet handshake reshaped the global order, we have to begin before the deal. Before oil became money. Before a single barrel was traded in dollars. Let's drift back to the years after the Second World War, to a time when the world was trying to stitch itself back together. Factories were humming again. Ships were once more crossing oceans, and the United States stood tall, its industries untouched by war, its dollar trusted like gold. Back then, money wasn't quite the thing we know today. It was simpler, slower. Every paper dollar, every bill in someone's pocket could be exchanged for real gold held somewhere in a vault, usually deep inside the U.S. Treasury or Fort Knox. It was a promise backed by metal, a quiet understanding between governments that value itself could be measured in something solid, something you could touch. Most countries kept their wealth in gold or in US dollars because at the time, those dollars were gold in another form. It was a peaceful rhythm, predictable, steady, dependable. Merchants, bankers, and politicians trusted the system. Ordinary people didn't think much about it. They were more focused on getting back to normal life. In small American towns, you could hear the gentle buzz of neon lights outside diners at dusk. Men came home in crisp shirts. Women switched off the radios after the evening news, and the word inflation was just a faint sound in newspapers. The economy felt calm, a comforting hum in the background of life. Meanwhile, far across the oceans, in the deserts of the Middle East, another kind of quiet life was beginning to stir. Oil, thick, dark, and ancient, was being pulled from the sand, like a sleeping giant slowly waking up. It flowed through steel pipes into waiting tankers bound for the industrialized world that couldn't seem to get enough of it. Cars, planes, power stations, all of it depended on oil. And yet, back then, oil was not the center of power. Gold still ruled the world's imagination. The dollar, tied to gold, was the world's trusted bridge between nations. But like all peaceful things, this balance was fragile, built on quiet assumptions and invisible promises. And in the background, slow changes were gathering, like wind before a storm. Though tonight, we won't rush there yet. For now, imagine the 1950s world as a quiet clock, ticking gently, each gear turning perfectly in time. Beneath that calm surface, something subtle was shifting. Oil was becoming more than just fuel. It was turning into the heartbeat of modern civilization. And the U.S., quietly watching, understood that whoever controlled the flow of oil would, in time, control the flow of everything else. So, before we move to that deal, that one secret understanding that changed everything, let's linger here a little longer. Imagine the post-war calm, the sound of radio crackle in living rooms, the scent of gasoline, the echo of factory whistles in the evening air. The world seemed steady, but in those steady years, the foundation for the petrodollar was already being poured silently, patiently, like cement, setting under moonlight. Chapter 2: The Quiet Crisis of the Dollar. As the 1960s quietly rolled in, the world looked peaceful on the surface. American music filled radios from Paris to Tokyo. Television glowed softly in living rooms, showing smiling families and shiny cars. The dollar was strong, and everyone believed it always would be. But beneath that smooth surface, something small, almost invisible, had begun to shift. The world was changing faster than anyone realized. America was spending more, trading more, building more. And slowly, silently, the math behind the dollar began to tremble. You see, when a nation promises that every paper dollar can be exchanged for gold, that promise is a heavy one. It's like saying, every time you trust this piece of paper, there's a bar of gold waiting somewhere behind it. But by the late 1960s, the United States had printed more paper than it had gold to back it up. Not out of greed or carelessness, but out of confidence. The world trusted the dollar, and America trusted that trust. Across the Atlantic, European banks began to notice something. Gold was leaving the vaults quietly, steadily, as countries asked for their gold in exchange for the paper they held. Ships left American shores carrying crates of shimmering metal, while in Washington, men in gray suits studied the numbers and frowned softly. President Nixon, calm and deliberate, faced a quiet truth the old system could no longer hold. The U.S. was spending heavily on war, on social programs, on the machinery of modern life, and other nations were beginning to ask questions. Questions whispered behind closed doors, in quiet boardrooms filled with the hum of air conditioning and the faint scent of coffee. By the early 1970s, the once golden promise was wearing thin. Gold was no longer enough to support the vast, growing appetite of a global economy built on dollars. Something had to change, but change rarely comes gently in economics. And so, on a warm August evening in 1971, the world's financial heart skipped a beat. The United States announced that it would no longer convert dollars into gold. The promise, kept for decades, was over. But don't imagine panic or chaos. The news spread like a sigh rather than a scream. Televisions flickered in dim living rooms. People listened quietly, not quite understanding what had happened. A few knew that something profound had just shifted, but most went on with their evenings. The dollar was now floating free from the weight of gold, a currency unanchored, sailing into an ocean of trust and trade. The world didn't collapse. In fact, something stranger happened. It kept running. The markets adjusted, governments adapted, and slowly a new question emerged. If money was no longer backed by gold, what would back it now? Oil was already becoming the lifeblood of modern industry, powering cars, heating homes, fueling planes. It was everywhere, in everything. And so, quietly, the idea began to take shape. What if the value of the dollar could be anchored not in gold, but in the thing every nation needed to survive? That idea would soon lead to a secret conversation far away from Washington under a different kind of sun, in a desert kingdom that held the key to the world's most powerful resource. But for now, as you listen, imagine the quiet shift of that time. The hum of printing machines deep inside the treasury. The echo of typewriters clicking in government offices late at night. The sound of a world adjusting to a new kind of money, invisible, unanchored, yet still trusted. It was a strange calm, the kind that comes before a new dawn. And in that stillness, the seeds of the petrodollar were quietly planted. Chapter 3, A Secret Conversation in the Desert. Some stories in history announce themselves loudly with speeches, parades, and flashing headlines. But others unfold quietly, hidden in the soft space between diplomacy and trust. The story of the petrodollar began like that, not with fireworks, but with a conversation under the shimmering heat of the desert sun. It was the early 1970s, and the world was still adjusting to a money system unmoored from gold. Governments were uneasy, oil was rising in importance, and America was searching for a new foundation, a new kind of anchor for its dollar. Half a world away, in the golden sands of Saudi Arabia, the world's richest oil fields stretched endlessly beneath a silent sky. Pipelines glistened under the morning light, and oil rigs turned slowly in the distance, the quiet machinery of wealth. The kingdom was rising, cautious and proud, holding a resource that every industrial nation needed. American officials understood something simple, yet profound. If they could connect the US dollar to the sale of oil, if every barrel of oil in the world were priced in dollars, then demand for their currency would never fade. Every country would need dollars to buy energy, and in doing so, they would quietly strengthen America's financial reach without a single word of force. So, in the warm desert air, representatives from Washington and Riyadh began to talk. Not in public, not in speeches, but in low, deliberate voices behind closed doors. The Americans offered protection, investment, and military support. In return, Saudi Arabia would price its oil exclusively in US dollars and deposit its surplus wealth back into US banks and bonds. It was, in essence, a silent trade. Energy for stability, dollars for security. A partnership built not on ideology, but on quiet mutual benefit. Imagine it for a moment, the calm of a desert palace at dusk. The golden light filtering through tall windows, the soft rustle of papers, the clink of porcelain coffee cups on silver trays. Outside, the wind moves through the palm trees, carrying the scent of sand and oil. Inside, a few words, carefully spoken, shape the destiny of nations. There was no treaty carved in marble, no grand announcement, just an understanding, an invisible thread linking oil to the dollar, and the dollar to the world. The idea soon expanded beyond Saudi Arabia. As other oil-producing nations followed, the world's most essential resource became tied to one currency and, through it, one nation's economy. It was a system born not from conquest, but from conversation. And perhaps that's why it lasted so long. Because in the quiet of that agreement lay something deeper, a mutual trust wrapped in necessity. From that point on, the value of the US dollar was no longer just a matter of gold or policy. It was backed by something more universal: energy. Every nation that needed oil needed dollars, and every dollar, in turn, was a ticket into the machinery of global trade. It was as if money itself had found a new pulse, beating to the rhythm of oil tankers gliding across calm waters and pipelines humming under distant deserts. And while most of the world slept, unaware of this invisible architecture, the system quietly began to take hold. Bankers, economists, and politicians would later call it the petrodollar system, but at its heart it was simply this: a silent deal between two worlds, one that needed security and one that needed oil. Chapter 4: How Oil Became Money. Once that quiet deal was sealed beneath the desert sky, the world began to change, softly, almost imperceptibly. No fireworks, no breaking news, just a subtle shift in how nations moved their money and measured their worth. In offices and ministries around the world, economists began to notice something unusual. Whenever countries bought oil, they needed dollars. Not their own currency, not gold, only dollars. Tankers carrying crude from the Persian Gulf to distant harbors in Europe, Asia, and America were now carrying more than energy. They were carrying the pulse of a new global system. Each shipment meant a quiet demand for U.S. currency, and with every purchase, the dollar's influence deepened quietly, invisibly, like roots spreading through the soil of the global economy. Picture it: an early morning at a bustling port, cranes lifting containers, ships humming softly as diesel engines thrum beneath the fog. Dock workers in hard hats move slowly, methodically. And somewhere in a quiet office nearby, a clerk types a few words into a ledger. Payment received in US dollars, a simple entry repeated thousands of times a day across the world, each one binding the system tighter. This, more than any speech or treaty, was how oil became money. It wasn't magic, it wasn't force, and it was repetition. Billions of transactions, day after day, settling in the same currency until the system became natural, normal, unquestioned. And in that quiet normalcy, America found something extraordinary. Because now every country needed dollars, they also needed to keep them as reserves, as safety. Central banks around the world began to hold U.S. Treasury bonds. They lent their trust and their savings to the stability of the dollar. It created a gentle circle of dependence. Oil producers sold in dollars. Buyers needed dollars to pay. And the United States, in turn, provided the world's most trusted financial instruments for those dollars to live in. You could think of it like a vast, calm river, oil flowing one way, money flowing the other. And in between, the steady hum of tankers, refineries, and banks, all quietly maintaining the rhythm of this invisible current. The brilliance of it was its simplicity. No one had to enforce it. No one had to remind anyone to use dollars. It just made sense. It became a habit, and habits, once global, are nearly impossible to undo. While people slept, while markets opened and closed across time zones, this system worked silently in the background. It didn't need headlines. It didn't need attention. It only needed time. And over time, that time became trust. Trust that the dollar would hold its value. Trust that America's economy would remain steady enough to back it. Trust that if you held the dollar, it meant something tangible, not in gold, but in oil, energy, and the promise of global stability. This was the quiet genius of the petrodollar. It transformed the world's most basic human need, energy, into a foundation for global finance. And it did so without anyone ever having to raise their voice. If you close your eyes, you might almost hear it. The soft rhythm of the system itself, tankers gliding across calm seas, keyboards clicking in distant bank offices, papers shuffling in low-lit rooms, a world half asleep, yet always awake through its machinery of trade. And somewhere in that stillness, oil had quietly become money, not coins, not bills, but a silent network of value that stretched from gas stations in Ohio to oil fields in Kuwait. Each drop of oil that flowed through a pipe carried a whisper of the dollar, and each dollar that changed hands carried a shadow of oil. They became one and the same, inseparable, like two sides of the same calm coin. In a way, it was a kind of modern alchemy, the ancient dream of turning something ordinary into something powerful. Only this time, the magic was built from policy, diplomacy, and trust. A transformation so complete, it felt invisible, and maybe that's what makes it so fascinating. Because sometimes the most powerful forces in the world aren't loud or visible, they're quiet, consistent, and everywhere, like the gentle pull of gravity, like the soft ticking of a clock in an empty room, or the steady flow of oil turned into money. Chapter 5. The Petrodollar's Quiet Power. By the time the 1980s arrived, the world had quietly adjusted to a new rhythm, one built around the pulse of the petrodollar. No one declared it. No government officially announced its arrival, but you could feel it softly woven into the background of daily life. The dollar was now more than paper and ink. It was energy. It was the ticket to oil, and therefore to movement, electricity, and warmth to everything that made the modern world run. In New York, traders in gray suits sat under fluorescent lights, watching oil prices flicker across green computer screens. In London, banks calculated currency reserves, and in Tokyo, factories relied on shipments of crude to keep their lights burning through the night. And beneath all those transactions, hidden behind the noise of global trade, was the same quiet truth. Every barrel of oil whispered the name of the dollar. That whisper gave America something no empire had ever held so subtly, the power to issue the very money the world needed most. Whenever other nations needed more dollars for trade, America could simply create them through banks, through markets, through debt. Not with arrogance, but with quiet assurance, like a conductor guiding a vast, unseen orchestra. This was not a power built on conquest or colonies. It was a softer kind of influence, invisible, but everywhere. A kind of financial gravity that pulled nations gently into orbit. Think of it this way. If a storm struck somewhere in the world, or a conflict disturbed the flow of oil, the world turned not to gold or to new currencies, but to the dollar. Its stability became a kind of comfort, a financial lullaby amid global uncertainty. For Americans at home, it meant their currency carried weight far beyond their borders. It kept imports cheaper, inflation quieter, and borrowing easier. And for much of the world, it meant dependence, but also predictability. A shared understanding that as long as oil flowed, the dollar would remain steady. You could see its quiet power reflected in the smallest details, in gas stations glowing at midnight across the highways of Texas, in the ticking of Wall Street's closing bells, in the calm hum of refineries that never slept. Each movement of oil, each flicker of financial exchange fed into the same silent rhythm, the petrodollar cycle. Oil flowed out, dollars flowed in, and the world kept turning out. The brilliance of this system was its stillness. It didn't need to shout or threaten. It worked because everyone trusted it would. Trust, that most fragile, invisible thing, became the foundation of global trade. And in that trust, America's quiet strength grew deeper. Its economy could expand through debt without collapse. Its banks could lend more freely. Its influence stretched across oceans, carried not by ships or soldiers, but by the calm authority of its currency. There's something soothing about this kind of power, not the sharpness of dominance, but the quietness of interdependence. Each nation found its role within the system, each benefiting from the stability it offered. Like gears in a giant, well-oiled clock. They turn together slowly, predictably, continuously. Imagine looking down at Earth from space at night. You'd see faint golden lights tracing shipping routes, cities glowing along coastlines, refineries shimmering in the dark. Each of those lights is a heartbeat of the petrodollar energy, trade, and trust, all tied together in the quiet hum of global connection. And as the world slept, it kept working. The petrodollar didn't rest. It didn't need to. Its power was in its consistency, a system so deeply woven into the world's daily rhythm that it became invisible. That invisibility is what made it enduring. Like the gentle flow of tides or the soft rotation of the planet itself, it simply continued. While generations passed, markets shifted, and politics changed, the petrodollar system remained. A quiet empire built not from land or conquest, but from the steady trust of global exchange. Chapter 6, The Hidden Cost of Stability. Every system that promises stability asks for something in return. Sometimes it's effort, sometimes it's trust, and sometimes it's quiet dependence that grows so slowly most never notice it forming. The petrodollar system offered the world a sense of balance. Prices steadied, trade became smoother. Energy moved predictably from one shore to another. For governments, it felt safe, a calm sea after the storms of earlier decades. But hidden within that calm was a soft weight, the cost of keeping the system steady. You could think of it as a kind of gentle illusion, because the dollar, backed not by gold, but by oil and confidence, depended entirely on belief. As long as the world believed in it, everything worked perfectly. But belief is fragile. It has to be constantly maintained, carefully tended, like a candle shielded from wind. To keep that candle burning, the United States needed to remain the trusted center of the financial world. That meant strong banks, steady interest rates, and a perception more than anything of control. Even small tremors in the economy had to be softened with careful words, deliberate action, and often quiet intervention. In return, the rest of the world gave something too, their flexibility. Nations adjusted their policies, balanced their reserves, and often followed the financial rhythms set in Washington, not always by choice, but by necessity. It wasn't domination, it was gravity. A gentle pull that everyone could feel, but few could resist. For ordinary people, this cost was invisible. A worker in Ohio filling his gas tank didn't see the link between oil prices and global currency flows. A farmer in Egypt buying fertilizer might not realize his costs rose because of the dollar's quiet shifts, yet each of them, in their own way, lived inside the same system, affected by decisions made thousands of miles away. Even nations that wished to move away from the dollar found it difficult, because the very structure of global trade, from oil contracts to shipping insurance, was written in its language. Changing it would mean rewriting the software of the world's economy, and no one wanted to press reset on something that seemed to work so smoothly. So the world kept going, and like any long night of steady breathing, the rhythm became hypnotic. Still, balance always carries tension, even quiet tension. When one nation's currency becomes the anchor for all others, it also carries their burden. America's deficits grew, its economy swelled on easy credit. Its policies rippled across oceans, influencing prices and investments in places most Americans would never see. It's a strange sort of power, one that comforts and constrains at the same time. Like holding the reins of a calm but enormous horse, gentle, yet always aware of its strength. And for the rest of the world, the cost was subtle too. Dependence can feel safe until it isn't. A sudden change in oil prices, a shift in interest rates, or a political shock could ripple through distant markets within hours. It was as if the world shared one heartbeat, strong, steady, but shared nonetheless. If you close your eyes now, you can almost hear it. The hum of refineries, the soft clicking of trading computers, the faint echo of tankers on open seas. A global lullaby built on trust and routine. That's the true secret of the petrodollar's success and its quiet cost. It kept the world steady, but it also bound it tightly, like a beautiful, intricate clock that never stops ticking, but must always be wound from the same key. And in that stillness lies the paradox. The system worked so well, it became invisible, so reliable, it became sacred, and so sacred, it became fragile. Chapter 7. The Gentle Shifts of a Changing World. By the time the 21st century arrived, the petrodollar had already shaped an entire era. It was the unseen thread woven through trade, policy, and power so familiar that few ever stopped to wonder how it began. But time, as always, brings change softly, gradually, like the slow dimming of a sunset. Nations grew, economies evolved, and technology began to rewrite the rules of commerce. Digital money, faster communication, and new alliances started to appear like faint ripples on the surface of a calm lake. Nothing dramatic, nothing immediate, just slow, steady movement, the kind that only becomes visible when you look back. In quiet meetings across Asia and the Middle East, discussions began not of rebellion, but of exploration. Could oil one day be priced in other currencies too? Could trade exist without the same dependency on the dollar? Not because the system had failed, but because the world itself was expanding, becoming more connected, more complex, more shared. The United States watched this shift calmly, almost knowingly. After all, influence built on trust doesn't vanish overnight. It simply adjusts. It breathes. And so the petrodollar system didn't crumble. It adapted. Oil still flowed. Dollars still moved. But slowly, quietly, alternatives began to take shape. The euro appeared, the Chinese yuan strengthened, and digital currencies whispered of new possibilities. Yet through it all, the petrodollar remained not as a ruler, but as a quiet foundation. It had become like the roots of an old tree, deep, steady, unseen, but essential. Even as new branches reached toward the sky, the roots held firm beneath the soil of global trade. In cities like Shanghai, Dubai, and Singapore, modern skylines reflected in glass and steel what once began as a conversation in the desert, a reminder that even the quietest agreements can echo through centuries. Each new building, each satellite dish, each glowing port at night carried a trace of that old deal, the link between energy and money, between trust and exchange. If you think about it, that's what history often does. It doesn't truly end. It transforms, like sand shifting in slow motion beneath the tide. What was once a new idea becomes tradition. And what was once stability begins to evolve into something else, something still unknown, still forming in the background of our modern lives. Tonight, as you listen to these words, that evolution is still happening. Currencies fluctuate. Markets breathe in and out. Nations adjust quietly, never all at once, but one thoughtful step at a time. And beneath it all, the same ancient rhythm continues the trade of energy, the flow of trust, the soft hum of global exchange. There's comfort in that thought, that even as the world changes, it does so gently. That progress doesn't always mean destruction. Sometimes it means continuity, a different melody, but the same calm beat. And maybe, years from now, people will look back at this time as another quiet chapter, a moment when the old world softly passed the torch to the new, without chaos, without noise, just naturally so. So, as the lights dim across the cities of the world, the story of the petrodollar doesn't end. It simply drifts into its next form, like a gentle tide receding from the shore, leaving behind faint patterns in the sand, reminders of how balance, once created, tends to linger. You've made it here, to the quiet end of the story, the part where history dissolves into stillness, and all that remains is the calm rhythm of your own breathing. The world outside your window has slowed. The air feels softer now. The noises of the day, the engines, the voices, the small movements have faded into a distant hush. And all that's left is you, listening, resting, gently floating in the calm that comes after understanding something vast. The story of the petrodollar, like so many chapters in history, isn't really about money or politics. It's about rhythm, the rhythm of trust, of trade, of people trying to make sense of an ever-changing world. It's a reminder that even in the grand machinery of economics, there's still something deeply human, the search for stability, for comfort, for a little bit of peace. As you lie there, eyes half closed, imagine the world as seen from far above, a planet glowing softly against the blackness of space. Tiny rivers of light stretching between continents, tankers drifting across quiet oceans, airplanes gliding above invisible borders, everything connected, everything moving, but all of it tonight at rest. You can almost hear it, the soft ticking of the global clock, the faint hum of distant cities, the gentle breathing of billions of people sleeping under the same sky. And in that sound, there's comfort. Because the world, for all its complexity, keeps finding its way back to balance. Again and again, it settles, adjusts, renews, just as you do with every slow, deep breath. Breathe in and let your thoughts drift a little further away. Breathe out and let go of the small details, the names, the dates, the systems. They've all done their part. You don't need to remember them now. All you need is this feeling, the weight of calm, the rhythm of slow understanding, the soft reassurance that the world turns quietly even as you rest. Think of those early meetings in the desert long ago. The hum of a ceiling fan, the low murmur of conversation, the scent of coffee and sand in the air. Those moments, those words, drifted outward through time until they reached this very night in the story that's now carrying you towards sleep. And isn't that something beautiful? That a whisper between a few people half a century ago could become a lullaby for someone listening half asleep across the ocean, reminding them that history, at its heart, is never gone. It's just resting too, so let the story rest now. Let it fade into silence as you do. The voices grow softer, the images dim like lanterns going out one by one. The music of the world slows, and soon there is only the steady sound of your breath. Gentle, even, complete. You are safe. You are calm. You are drifting, weightless, through the quiet glow of history and sleep. And as you finally let go, remember, the world turns quietly. The systems hum softly. The night holds you in its rhythm. And everything, everywhere, is exactly as it should be. Good night. Sleep well. And may your dreams be calm, deep, and full of wonder.